Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Running Explained podcast. I am your host, Coach Elizabeth. Thank you for joining me today, wherever you are around the world, whether you're in your car or on a run or doing errands or what have you. I appreciate you being here and really enjoy spending time with you all. So thank you. Now, this was a fun one. My guest this week is Leautey, and Marie ran around the world. And then she wrote a book about it, which is really good. The book is called Lootie's World Run, and it's like part travel memoir, which it is, because it's literally a travel memoir, and part like running around the world. And I mean that slightly figuratively, in that you can't literally run across ocean, but there is an official governing body for sanctioning runs around the world. They have rules, there are guidelines, there are things you have to follow to make it official. And she did all of those things. And she ran a little over 17,000 miles, or 28,000 kilometers, over 825 days of running, which averages out to just under a marathon per day of running across 4 continents. And of course, multiple years without getting so much as a blister, or so she claims. So this is a really fun conversation. I hope you enjoy. I know that I did. Marie, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it's an honor to be part of your podcast.
So can I ask where you're joining us from? Because I know you are quite the world traveler.
I am very nomadic indeed, and I currently live in Greece. So you are having me live from Athens, capital of Greece.
A city I haven't been to yet, but I'm very excited to see it one day soon.
Yeah.
So Marie, go ahead and please tell us, who are you?
Well, I'm Leautey. I'm French, and in 2022, I finished my world run and became the second woman in history to have run around the world. And also, incidentally, the fastest and first woman ever to have run across 4 continents entirely from ocean to ocean. So that's my feat of arms.
Amazing. And you wrote a book about it called Lootie's World Run.
Yeah, Lootie is my nickname, obviously. So, yeah, I wrote about it to share as much as I can, to inspire others, to take a big leap of faith, and to show that, yeah, we do have incredible resources in that world we live in. You know, I've got a passion for it. That's why I've been a nomad my whole life. And there is so much to see, so much to learn. So that's what I wanted to share.
And the big question, of course, is that how did you become a runner?
Oh, I became a runner quite late. I was 26 years old. I think at that time I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, and I was not exactly very fit physically. But one day, and I tell about that in the book, but to cut it short, one day, 2 of my friends invite me for a run at the end of the day to do a little 5-kilometer loop. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm 26. My friends are like twice my age. They were in their 50s. And I thought, well, I ought to be fitter than them, right? So I put a pair of shoes and I joined them for a run. And I got a big slap in the face after less than a kilometer into the run. I had to stop because I simply could not run further. And it was such a humiliation, a source of anger at myself, and a big surprise as well. But I felt completely humiliated by myself. And that very day, so I come back to my car, drove home, and I said, that's it. Now, my life, I'm going to own it back. So I threw away my cigarettes. And that night, I went again around the block trying to run. And 2 weeks later, I was able to come back to my friends and run with them, clenching my teeth, this 5-kilometer loop. But from that day on, being outdoors, doing what I enjoy, running in nature and everything has always been a part of my life since that day. Yeah.
And I have 3 quick get to know you questions. I'm trying to modify them for the type of runner that you are. Because my first question is, if you could have an all expenses paid trip with guaranteed race entry to any race in the world, what would you choose? And I don't get the sense that you care all too much about racing.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I've done so before this world run. You know, I had been a runner for like 15 years before I embarked on my world run. And I did take part in races, and it was a fun way to meet people as well, to spend your Saturday or Sunday with other people and getting to meet people. But I was not really that competitive, if you can hear that from somebody who's run around the world. But this is not the timing aspects. But if you could all paid expensive, I would like to join like one of the fun marathons. I still haven't done it, like, you know, like the Champagne Marathon or the Beaujolais Nouveau Marathon. One of these marathons that is more like a festival where you just go there to have fun, enjoy the local products, and try to get to the finish line in not too bad a state. So yeah, I would love to do that one day.
I think there's a marathon in France in the Burgundy region where it's very wine focused as well as run focused.
So you've got the Champagne one, and you've got the Beaujolais Nouveau is the new wine of the year. Usually it's red wine. And so at every refueling station, you've got little shots of wine and saucisson and cheese and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. Basically, when you sign up for the race, you have to agree in the disclaimer that you are not doing this race for competitive purpose, which is kind of self-explanatory.
All right. My second question is, what is your current favorite thing to fuel during your runs?
I would say water, because there is nothing else really that I do eat or drink during my runs. Sometime during the world run, especially when it was like during the heat waves. I had 2 heat waves. Then I like to also have like a Coca-Cola, if we can name a brand, in the second part of the run, just because I was drinking so much water. I would be drinking 6 liters of water or so during the run. And it was good to just have a different taste in my mouth, and especially as your mouth runs dry. So that's the only thing. Other than that, I really don't take anything at all.
So my third question, obviously running around the world, you put a lot of kilometers on your shoes. And I have to ask you if you have had a favorite pair of running shoes, a brand or a model that you think is just the best.
Well, in general, because I was also running this world run, pushing my own gear, I didn't carry extra pairs of shoes. So the way it goes was whenever the current pair I was running was starting to feel too used or uncomfortable or with a hole in the sole, for some example, I would just buy at the next running shop whatever I could find. So I didn't have really a choice always of brands, or I didn't have the luxury to have a favorite. But in general, there were 2 criteria for me, actually 3. One is not a criteria, it's a fact. I would always take my running shoes 1 size above my normal size. Number 2, the minimum heel possible. And number 3, the minimum drop possible. The drop is, you know, the height lost between the heel and the front of the shoe. So this has to be minimum to allow the foot to land and propulse as normally, naturally as possible. So that was my criteria. If they filled this, they were my perfect shoes.
Did you have a pair that you purchased during your journey that you were surprised at how much you liked them? Like, oh, I didn't think I was going to like these shoes as much as I do.
Yes, actually, it's a pair that I bought them in Bozeman, Montana. So I actually cannot remember the brand of it, but it's a brand that you guys only have in the US. And I didn't know the brand, and I thought, oh, that's really a leap of faith. But it actually took me almost till the end of my US crossing, because I was crossing from Seattle all the way to New York. And they lasted and they were comfortable, and I had never heard of the brand before. So that was a real surprise, really.
All right, now let's get into the meat of our conversation, because you have run around the world, and we're going to talk about it because that is an incredibly incredible accomplishment. But first, I would like to let our listeners know what running around the world entails, because there are very specific criteria for what this is and what you were doing. So what is the criteria for an official run around the world?
Yeah, so when you run around the world, basically the record or the ratification, certification is not done by the Guinness Book of Records because there is a specific federation for it. With only 7 members to date. It's called the World Runners Association. So you can go on their website and have a look. Basically, there are basically 10 rules. Because of course, if you're talking about planet Earth, which is 70% water, since we can't run on water, how exactly do you define running around the world? So they have said, for instance, okay, your run has to be in a continuous direction. So for instance, you go east to west or west to east. That's one thing, and you stick to that direction. It has to be, every continent you cross has to be crossed from one ocean to the other one, whichever way you do it. The only exception being Europe. The European crossing stops where the Asian continent starts, which is usually around Istanbul in Turkey. That's usually where but it could be in Russia at the Ural Mountains, for instance. So beside Europe, that doesn't really technically finish at an ocean. That has to be from ocean to ocean. A minimum of 4 continents. So, there are 7 continents, but if you take away Antarctica, you are left with 6 populated continents. So 4 minimum. That means that you will have to run on both the northern and the southern hemisphere. You have got to go through 2 antipodal points. These points are basically points that are opposite on the Earth's surface. So if you were to punch the globe with a needle and see where it lands on the other side, that's 2 antipodal points. So there are not so many on the planet. Most of the time, if you pinch, you end up in the water. So they are quite challenging to find. Mine were, to give you an example, between New Zealand and Spain. They are completely opposite on the surface of the Earth. So, and then, of course, it has to be a minimum distance of 26,232 kilometers, which is a very precise number, and which is derived from the following. If you follow a line around the Earth and you stick to it, whichever line it is, the maximum amount of Earth you will come across is 26,232 kilometers. The circumference of the world being 40,000 kilometers, of course, but there is so much water, so the maximum you could run on a continuous run would be 26,232 kilometers. So that is set as a minimum distance. Of course, some of us in the 7 people who run around the world have done more than that. Tony Mangan, the Irish guy, has done 50,000 kilometers. That was a heck of a journey. So yeah. So it's just guidelines. Basically, these rules are here to help you structure exactly what do you mean by a run around the world. It's such a big endeavor. And it's also to ensure that this is not something self-declaratory. You don't say, oh yeah, I've been running around the world. No, there is some verification, and in a way it helps preserve our legacy as well. So I like the fact that there was an institution for that.
So you did this entirely self-supported. You ran with a stroller. This is incredible. But my question about the ratification of this is that how did you prove that this is what you did when you were by yourself?
Yeah. So I had 2 sources of information. One source of information I had is I was carrying at all time a satellite beacon. And this satellite beacon was posting my position every 2 minutes on my website. And this allowed for people to meet me unannounced on the road and verify that it was indeed me running, as I was saying, and being in the right place. The second thing I was doing, I was posting every evening my GPS data also on my website and sometimes on Facebook, Instagram. But I had 2 sources, so I would every night download to Strava and Garmin and put the link are still available. If you go to my website, every single run is documented with this GPS track. So that. Then you've got, of course, external accounts of your journey. All the people you meet. I was keeping a daily blog as well on my website and on social media. So that's other source of information. People who come and run for a day with me or an hour. This is all the things that corroborate that you are indeed doing what you are doing. And journalists, articles, anything that can help them make sure that you've done what you said you've done.
Of the people who joined you for a run, did you have a most memorable companion?
Oh, yes, actually, it was when I was on approach when I was leaving Spokane.
in the state of Washington. An incredible lady joined me. She was 77 years old at that time, so she must be above 80 now. And she ran by my side. She's the oldest to have run by my side. And she told me her incredible story. She has taken part into you probably know this race in the US, the Rock 100 or Hard Rock 100.
Hard Rock 100,
unbelievable. Yep. She's the oldest woman finisher, and she literally finishes this race with like 2 seconds to spare. Her name is Gunhill Swanson. There is a video on YouTube when she is at the finish and everybody awaits her. It is just incredible. And when she was telling me this story and her life of running, she was and I was very emotional receiving that story because it meant so much to her. So I was very happy to have her for a little bit by my side. That was a great encounter. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the logistics. But before we go into what you did, let's talk about why. And I know you talk about this in the book, and I mean, for anybody who is interested, I would highly recommend reading it. It's a fabulous book. It's so well written, which I know we talked about before. And I really do mean that. But why? Why do we do this?
Thank you. No, I think it was deeply anchored in me. You know, I've been a nomad my whole life. I left France when I was 20, and then I went on to live, you know, in the UK, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Greece, in Singapore, in Southeast Asia. And to me, my whole life was about seeing how people live somewhere else, this curiosity of other culture, other places, other ways of living, and so many things to learn. And I think I was 42 when I left for my world run. I think I wanted to experience the world differently, in a more sensorial way, if that makes sense. And I think by doing it without any means of locomotion, me being my means of locomotion, meant that I would be able to feel, to smell, to see, to hear, to taste everything along the way. And I think that this unique, continuous experience of the world, you know, slowly moving from one country to one other country, from one continent to another, from a season to another, all this together was the experience I wanted to feel. That's what I was seeking. And I wanted to learn in an accelerated way. And it was just incredible. Yeah, that's why.
Did you think that when you first had this idea of doing something like this, was it immediately, I'm going to run around the world? Or did you start thinking, I'll run across Europe or I'll run across Australia?
No, it was immediately the world. Basically, it's a moment I described in my book as well. I was in a phone call at work, and because I used to be a CFO, finance director for a big company, and you know, sometimes calls goes on and on and on. And I always have a little notepad where I scribble a little bit, I doodle and things like that. And there was this particular phone call where I hang up the phone and I look at what I've done, because it's always a bit absent-mindedly. I had drawn this little woman on top of a globe, of a planisphere, and she was running on it, you know, is the movement of running. And I thought, wow, what a great idea. And it struck me. I know it's silly because I drew it, but I didn't draw it very consciously. And I immediately was taken by that. I said, that would be so cool to run around the world. And I immediately went on to Google because I wanted to know, does it exist? Has it ever been done? Is it something that humans can do? And of course, as soon as I started Googling it, I received the answer that the WRA was there, and there were 6 people, 1 woman and 5 men who had done it. So I thought, well, yeah, that's possible. And immediately, almost immediately, that's the point where everything started to click, and I started working towards, I'm going to get there on whatever the starting line, and I'm going to run around the world. So it was instantaneous, yeah.
I do find that having these ideas, these grand designs, wow, I really would love to be able to do this thing. We have so many of these thoughts, but rarely are we able to take action on them. But something that you talk a lot about in your book is this leap of faith. And you even said it earlier, this leap of faith, right? And I assume for people who know you, this wasn't a surprise, but to have somebody come up with this idea and then follow through on it doesn't happen very often. So this is incredible. And it took you a couple years to actually get everything in order.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. In one side, don't get mistaken with it, but you've read the book, so you know. I call it a leap of faith because it's something I have been doing all my life through my nomadic existence. For instance, I would be settled in, let's say, Scotland, my life starting to get settled, everything all right. And I just have an opportunity to go whatever, let's say Greece or something. And that's it. I will take the leap of faith to go in a country where I'm not familiar with the culture or the language. And it's going to be uncomfortable at the start to settle into new routine, to find a way to live there and everything. But I want to do it. So I pack my life into 2 suitcases, drop my job and take a new job in Greece. So these leaps of faith, they provide me so much satisfaction because supposedly you risk a lot, but if you have a solid discipline, if you are truly committed to what you're doing, that means learning the new language, trying to find ways to integrate in the local community, trying to find ways to achieve at work and be really on top of it. If you have this discipline and if you plan it, then you will be successful. So when this idea to come around the world was materialized in my mind, yes, I decided I would do it. But the first thing what I start to do immediately is I start planning. How am I going to do it? How am I going to transport my gear? How many kilometers can I run in a day? Do I need supplies? Do I need camping gear, or can I just stay in hotel rooms and everything along the way? And it took me 2 years to plan everything. So I had my whole world run planned. Of course, nothing ever goes to plan, and I encountered things like COVID, for instance, that I couldn't have possibly planned for. But the key to having just a dream and keep it as a dream and going for it is to build the plan that connects your idea to the dream and that makes it a reality. That's key.
So I think you said you planned over 700 stages. So you had the logistics on your own for planning out basically your entire around the world run. Did you do that all at once, or did you do it continent by continent?
Yeah, I mean, I first chose the continents I was going to run on in their entirety. Initially, before COVID, of course, my plan was to run on all 6 populated continents and run 4 entirely. So to say that I've run on all 6 of them, but unfortunately, with COVID, it was not possible, and I had tremendous delays as well. But that meant I wanted to be financially independent, so I had to use all my savings through that. I had to know where I was starting and finishing every day, because I can't take the risk to finish in a place if I don't have any water or any food. That's a no-no, or at least if there are places like that, because in the US and in Australia, you do have these long stretches of road that are more than 42 kilometers, a marathon, with no refueling option. But I need to be able to plan for it when it happens. That's the reason why I wanted to plan these stages, all of them. So yes, I had a huge Excel spreadsheet with 700 rows and all description of everything. And also, you need to know if you are crossing the Andes, for instance, in South America, how high are you going to go? How many kilometers can you run at 4,000 meters of elevation? All these things you need to know. So that's why I was planning it.
Obviously, you probably could have chosen many starting and ending places. Like you said, in your US, you went from Seattle to New York. You probably could have gone from, Los Angeles to, I don't know, Miami. When you were choosing your routes, what were you looking for? Were you looking for variety? Were you looking for a specific type of weather? Were you looking for specific landmarks? How did you choose where you were going to go?
For instance, for this US crossing, for instance, I had some very strong imagery of the US. And they were names of states that made me dream. I had read this book when I was a youngster called Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. And in this book, he crosses the US with his dog in his caravan called Rocinante. And it's a fabulous book. I was young, but the names of the states and the cities he was talking about were really imprinted in my mind. And I thought, Montana, it has always made me dream. It's in this book. And, Steinbeck says it. He says, I have admiration and whatever for other states, but for Montana, it's love. And when I read the book, I remember thinking, what does that feel like to be in love with a place, with a region, with a state, And so it triggered a lot of things in my imagination. So for the US, I went really by that. I also saw finishing in New York would be quite symbolic. So that's how I chose it. For the Southern America, well, I was so thrilled about crossing the Andes. It had to be on my to-do list. Europe, I wanted to follow the Mediterranean coast. Unfortunately, COVID came around and it changed my plans, so around everywhere in Europe. So it depends, on each continent. I was also looking at the road, trying to see what was feasible. For instance, for Australia, which is such an unpopulated continent, there were not many options. There is literally just one road that crosses from west to east. So that was this desert road I had to take. There was no other option. So very different on each continent, but there was always, it was never picked randomly. I had reason to choose a certain route.
So in your European leg, you started in Portugal and you ended in Istanbul. But I want to ask you about that because this is the first continent you did and you had a little COVID interruption. I mean, reading that section, knowing what was going to happen, we know what happened, right? The lockdowns happened, but I could feel this sense of impending doom. Like, no, Lootie, watch out. You're going to get trapped. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that just incredible, wild time in our world and what you were doing, your very first continent.
Yeah, so I started my world run in December 2019. So when you know the history, it was exactly 3 months before COVID hit. And you can imagine also at the beginning of such an adventure, you want to check that everything is going fine, that, day after day you adjust to the load and that you are having fun doing it. So, you feel very guarded. And during these 3 months, everything was going perfectly. Of course, during the World War Run, I didn't have any injuries. But, for me, during these 3 months, it was also important to check that. So I was like, oh, everything's going to plan. Everything's going to plan. But I was also thinking, at some point, things will not go to plan. And of course, as I was crossing Italy, where the first confinement in the world was declared, after China, that is, well, of course, they decided to close their border, shut down the whole tourist industry. And I was stranded. I was like, what do I do? My way of life is to move from one place to another. What do I do? So I ended up just stranded, just like anyone else. And I used this time. I needed to keep training, right? Because I thought this confinement is not going to last forever. When it restarts, how do I make sure I'm still in a condition to run that? And where I was on lockdown, you were not allowed more than 1 hour a day outside your house. And I was like, 1 hour a day is never going to be enough. So there came an inspiration. I volunteered on some volunteers platforms and I got a volunteer job, running around Paris with my stroller and distributing meals to the homeless. So my day was about running from door to door, collecting meals, and then running in the city and distribute these meals to the homeless. So it filled two things for me. One is I had a purpose. I was not stranded feeling useless and everything. So I had a purpose, and I was also keeping my form, keeping trained. So it was actually, I was very free in this period where everybody was locked in. I had this tremendous privilege through what I was doing to be able to experience this freedom. So for me, it's part of the world run as well, in a way. Yeah.
You said in your book that point where you had to fly, you had to leave. What country were you in? You were in Italy or in Greece? And they said, you have to leave, you have to go home. And you said, that was
very brutal.
Yeah. You said in your book at that point that would be an opportunity to say, I tried. Well, I got as far as I could. But you said that this quitting, stopping, never crossed your mind. You always thought, I'll deal with whatever is happening and eventually I will be able to continue.
Yeah, but then I thought, I know it's funny because you're thinking about that in the frame of the world run, but that's more or less what everybody else did or tried to do. Every company didn't say, oh, I'm whatever, I'm a restaurant, I'm this and that. Oh, that's it, let's shut down because anyway, what can I do? Everybody trying to find ways to adapt. Like if I take the example of restaurants, they started doing takeaways, they started doing other things, home deliveries. We all try to not drop what was at the core of us, but to keep doing it, and just by adapting. So the same one with my world run, I thought, how can I adapt, adjust, so that when it's bound to finish at some point, this lockdown, how will I be able to restart? And yes, the thought of giving up never occurred because the desire to go was so strong. I don't know what it would have taken for me to give up. Nothing. I think nothing. I was never going to give up.
I think a lot of people, when they read about and think about what you've done, it's almost an incomprehensible amount of running to think that you ran almost a marathon for total. So almost, about 25 miles a day. It's about 40.5 kilometers per day on average, totaling 28,249 kilometers or 17,655 miles over roughly 2 years. I think for the average runner, a marathon is maybe a once a year, and maybe some people once in a lifetime thing. And you're out running almost a marathon most days a week. I think a lot of people just want to know, how the heck do you get your body to do that?
Yeah, well, that was also the point of my 2 years preparation, is what kind of volume can I handle and how do I put it to the test? The first thing to say is that the fundamental difference between a marathon race and the way I was running my marathon on a daily basis, it's a different state of mind. It's a different approach. I'm not racing. There is no cutoff time. I'm here for the enjoyment. So if I run through a beautiful landscape or I see kangaroos bouncing in the background, I can just stop, enjoy the scene, take some pictures, really feel myself with it, and then start running again. So it's a completely different way of doing things. It doesn't mean that, some of my marathons were continuous without breaks, but if there was something that would call me for attention, I would, of course, take the time to meet people, to see things, to pick a fruit from a tree or whatever. So there is not this pressure. And second of all, I am not running every day my best marathon. That I don't think I could have done that for 2 years and a half. So I found this pace, which was my natural pace, and that I found during my 2 years of preparation. To give you a rough idea, before the World Run, my marathon time was 3 hours and 20 minutes. During the World Run, my marathons were run at a pace of, on average, 4 hours and a half, which is still a good time. I do take this, but it's far from my optimal performance. So by not going to my optimal performance in terms of speed, I achieve optimal performance in terms of endurance, because this was a pace that was sustainable and I could do every day. So it's slight differences that make everything different, and also not focusing on numbers other than kilometers. The only numbers that mattered to me every day was just the number of kilometers run, not the speed, not the heart rate, not the cadence, not any of the numbers you can find on your fancy watch or anything. And disconnected yourself from numbers sets you in a different mind frame, and that's super important.
Something that you describe really well, I think, is conveying the freedom of the experience, where you're not beholden to, I think at one point you said, I don't want to, be glued to my Excel spreadsheet. I'm here to enjoy myself. It's okay to be flexible, but the freedom that you felt in being able to set your own schedule and dictate your own pace. And the only thing that mattered was getting from point A to point B every day. That's it. Just describing it, like, oh, wow, what an incredible feeling to just be able to run.
Yeah, the feeling of freedom was multifaceted. There was this one thing, I used to be at a high level in finance, working for big corporate companies. And, my life was dictated by time, meetings, deadlines and everything. There is always something, you're rushing to the next deadlines. So the first freedom was to remove myself from a life dictated by time. Like you say, I start my run in the morning at the break of dawn. Nobody is waiting for me anywhere. I have all day to do it. And if I feel like doing it, like walking or slowly, I could do it. I didn't do it, but I could do it. I had this freedom. So you remove an immense pressure when you remove the essence of time. And I think removing time from my life allowed me to perform like I did. I could not have, if you had told me, Marie, you're going to run for 2 years, a marathon every day in 4 hours and a half, I would have told you, no chance, no way. I'm sorry. You're talking to the wrong person. I can't do it. But by removing all sort of expectations and time, then I was able to do it. So freedom was freedom from the notion of time, but also freedom to go wherever I wanted. And some days, freedom to set my home for the night wherever I wanted. When I was crossing some places in Australia or in the big Midwest in the US, I was just pitching my tent. I made sure it was in the safe place. And there is a sense of, well, that's my home for the night. This lake is my bathroom. You feel a strong connection to the world. You feel you truly belong there. It's devoid of any subterfuge or artifice. It's a natural life, and it's the freedom of going just me, without any motorized nothing, just my feet. It's just an amazing feeling of total freedom.
Do you have a sense of how this has changed you?
Well, it has not changed the deep nature of who I am. Being nomadic and this quest for the world and for what is elsewhere is still there, and it's still burning in me. It has probably unlocked something in me in that I thought I had not many fears when I started this world run, but I removed some more layers. And actually removing fears is also a great ingredient for freedom. The fears, they don't define us, but they limit us a lot. How many people have told me, but are you not scared? A woman alone around the world, you're going to be raped, attacked, you're going to, it's unsafe. And I went like, you know what? These are your fears. These are not my fears. I've been traveling the world in my own way for 20 plus years as a nomad. And it's not, the world is not as scary as you think it is. And when you remove those fears, you are more able. And also there is this thing about fears that there is a perception of your fear. Like we say, an animal can smell your fear. It's maybe a sixth sense. It's something that we radiate. And when you don't fear, you also radiate that. There is a feeling that you're safe and strong and confident. And if that world run has changed me, is that it has probably allowed me to go one step further in getting rid of my fears.
I wasn't going to ask you the safety question because I felt like that was going to, kind of like, oh my gosh, how did you keep yourself safe? But you did note in parts of your book that in some places you ran, it was just unusual to see people jogging. Like people didn't run. Like you mentioned when you were in Albania, like people don't just go jogging that often in certain parts of the world. But in terms of the safety thing, I mean, there are certain parts of the world where I'd be more concerned about some animals that would potentially be dangerous.
Yes, and actually my mom was scared because when I started my US crossing, leaving from Seattle, I didn't find straight away, the tear gas for bears. And there had been this horrible story. It was summer 2021 of this woman who has been killed by a bear. She was sleeping in her tent. I think she had kept her food or something too close to her. And And so the beginning of my US crossing, without that tear gas, that for bears, I felt, whoa, this is, I will be more comfortable when I have one with me. And actually 10 days, I think, into my running, a cyclist that I met just finished his own crossing and gave me his tear gas bottle. So I felt a little more reassured. But to finish back on the safety topic, there is one important thing to say, and I think I talk about it in the book, is that I was pushing my gear in a stroller, a baby stroller. And so typically when I was running in hot places, like whether it's Albania where people don't go for a run, what am I doing? Or even, tell you what, in the middle of North Dakota or Montana, you run in places where you don't see nobody going for a jog. But when they saw me, they never saw whoever it is, ill-intentioned or not ill-intentioned people, they never see a woman running alone. No. What they were seeing was a mom pushing her baby in a stroller. And that makes a big difference. I sort of realized that it was a sort of universal taboo. A woman alone may be a target for an attack. A mom pushing her baby? No. Whether it's because it's too complicated or because it just doesn't appeal to people with ill intentions or because it's just something too sacred. You don't touch a mom and a baby. And I found out this helped me be safe and stay safe. Definitely. And not only that, but it encouraged people to be kinder even towards me, asking me, do you have enough water for you and the baby? Do you know where you guys are staying tonight? Do you need help? Do you need accommodation? Can I do something for you? Because there was this sense that I had a baby in my stroller. Little did they know I only had a bag of 10 kilos of belonging, and that's it.
Now, I have to ask you, because you said you didn't get injured, which is true, but not entirely true, because you did suffer an injury.
Yes, I had put several stratagems in place to ensure that I would keep my body in good health. And naturally, I was mostly worried about everything involved in the running mechanic, from the toes to the base of my neck, basically. I forgot to put in this stratagem my arms and my hands. And what happened is, when I'm pushing this stroller, the stroller is about 12 kilos empty, plus about 10 to 12 kilos of material, plus my water. So I'm pushing 30 kilos, right? It's on wheels, so you get a momentum, but every few strides, you're grabbing the handlebar and pushing it forward. And so you do this movement, repeatedly for 4 hours and a half a day on average, with a load of 30 kilos applied to it. And of course, my fingers suffered from it. So I ended up with it's called the trigger finger syndrome, where fingers end up like getting locked in place, and it's very painful. And so I addressed this issue on the go. But yeah, that's memorably the only injury I suffered during the World Run.
I mean, that's just incredible. We know the injury rates for runners, they're very high. They're way too high. And to think that you were able to do this, essentially keeping yourself healthy the entire time, is really incredible. But at the same time, I don't think we should think it's that unusual, because I think we should not accept the high rates of injury that most runners experience. So we should be striving for, no, I can do this injury-free.
Exactly. But I think the human body is made for running. The way our skeleton is made, the way our tendons and ligaments and muscles are made. We were runners at some point in our evolution path. So the thing I did when I started, and I thought to myself, well, I'm going to be running 700 marathon. If I look at the statistics for people who run 1 marathon a year, 50 to 70% get an injury at some point, whether it's during their preparation, during the race itself, or following the race. And I thought, this is not acceptable to me. If I have an injury at the end of my world run, that's it. So I have to really be smart about it. So the first thing I did was I treated my body like an engine, if you will, right? So I wanted to know how the engine works. So I went back to the anatomical charts, trying to understand how every joint in my body worked towards the running. I wanted to understand the biomechanics, to have a very fine perception. Because how can I address an issue If I just say, oh, I've got a pain around the ankle, well, not good enough. I have to know, is it muscular? Is it the tendon? Is it the bone? Is it whatever it is? I need to understand whenever I receive a red flag signal from my body, I need to understand. It's like a proprioception, but really refined. So I studied the foot, how it's made with all the 26 bones in it, what it's made for, how everything moves together. And during my run, I implemented what I called body scan. So several times throughout the marathon, I would take all the time it took to run from the top of my toes, tip of my toes, to the base of my neck, analyzing everything. How are the toes? How do they feel? Fine. Okay, let's move on. Under the feet, the sole of the foot. How is it going? Is there any tensions? Is there something that rubs? Is there something? If you do this enough during your run, first of all, it becomes a habit and it becomes something you like doing because it's a sort of meditation about your own body. But it allows you to catch anything that would go wrong. And by anything, I mean anything. For instance, I didn't get a blister during this world run. Because if there was something rubbing, a sock or a lace is too tight or anything, I would just stop and readjust. Why should I get a blister? A blister, when you run a marathon a day, can be really, really, really hard to deal with because I don't have the time to heal from it. Something as benign as that. So this body scan, I really believe, is ultimately, and also the close knowledge of how my body works, those two together allowed me to address everything that I felt. How do you address? I give you a few examples. So yeah, it can be some part of clothes that are shuffling, or it could be that maybe I've spent too much time on gravel off-road lately. Maybe I need more asphalt, or the other way around. Maybe there was too much uphill lately. Maybe I need to run more on flat. Or like sometimes you cannot really address the problem directly. So you have to find stratagem. For instance, when I was crossing Australia, it's a flat desert for 1,200 kilometers. So you got the repetition of the same movement, and there is no variety too much with ups and downs. So you have to address your problem differently. If you feel the repetition is causing you tensions, then maybe I would try working on my strides. I would do long strides or short strides, trying to break the rhythm of doing the exact same movement over and over. So there is always a way you can go around when you understand what your body is telling you and why there is a signal. So it's totally the opposite of the no pain, no gain that is so prevalent in the running world, where, you have to really go through that in order to get better. No, I would get better and I will be endurant if I am not in pain and if my body doesn't break down. As simple as that.
Was that something that you were employing during your preparation as well? Or is it something that you started doing? Yeah, so that was something you were practicing leading up to the run.
Yeah, I started during my preparation because this was a concern from the moment I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And, knowing only 6 people before me have done it, there is also a good reason. Many more people have started, but had to stop due to injuries or other things. So it was essential in my preparation, and also not just with the body, but, to make sure that during my preparation, I go through all kinds of weather, for instance. I was living in Singapore back then, where the temperature is so high and humidity is 90% humidity every day. It's on the equator. So, I was thinking, I have to be able to run in this as well and not be surprised by it, because that would be an integral part of the world run. Or if I run in the rain, well, I will be soaked. That's tough. That's how it is. But, learn to accept it. Accept the wind, accept the cold, the hot, accept the hills, accept everything, because I can't complain about it. I just run around the world. If I start complaining about, all the things that possibly go against what I like better. So I learned to like all kind of conditions as well. So yeah, part of the preparation.
So your roots, let's look here about where you actually went. This is absolutely incredible. So yeah, like you said, Europe, Portugal to Istanbul. And then you did, your next continent was the US. So you did Seattle to Manhattan. And then you did South America. So you started in how is it pronounced that? In Chile?
It's called Molin. It's basically just at the top of Patagonia. So Patagonia on the Chilean part. Yeah.
And then you went up and then over to Buenos Aires. And then your fourth continent was Oceania, where you went from Cotswold, so that's on the western coast of Australia, all the way across, gosh, that's a big continent, to Sydney, and then over to Auckland. So did you have to go to New Zealand to get the antipodal point for your run?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I had one exemption that was granted to me during this world run, is that because Oceania closed its doors for 2 years, it only reopened in March 2022, having closed like 2 years before, and not allowing any travelers, not even allowing its own citizen back on. So I applied to the World Runners Association and I said, look, if I wait after Europe, I should have gone to Asia and then Oceania. I say, if I wait for Oceania, I don't know how long I'll be stranded in Europe. They say they are not going to reopen their borders any soon. So they allowed me to skip Oceania and continue my world run with North America, South America. And they say, well, hopefully by the time you finish running those 3 continents, then there is a chance Oceania will be open. So that's the reason why my world run didn't satisfy this criteria of continuity because of this continent. So every other criteria, of course, I had to tick, which is why I ended my run in Auckland to make sure I had passed through an antipodal point. Yes.
Now I have to bring up the story about the spring onion going into Australia.
Oh gosh, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing and this is very frustrating. You know, Australia is notoriously very tough on their border control. You cannot bring anything, not as much as an apple or a piece of walnut or whatever. You can't, you know, any foreign bacteria. And for good reason, you know, they had problem in the past, you know. So we arrive at the border and basically my partner, because for Australia I had my friend James who was on his bicycle and he had his bicycle packed. I had my backpack and basically when they saw us, they asked us, probably because we were carrying so many things, to unpack our luggage. And when they start opening one of our luggage, we realized that there is a completely dead, dried out spring onion in there. And it was a little game we had in South America where, because I don't like onion, James kept putting onion in my socks or in my shoes or with my toothbrush or anything. So I would always find this stupid dried up onion somewhere in my belongings. And it was just a prank, right? Because when I found it, the first thing I did was try to hide it in his luggage. And then the onion traveled for like 3 months between his luggage and mine. And unfortunately, we had forgotten about it. So when we landed in Australia, they took this dried up onion out of our bag. And I got charged $2,600 for it. This was ridiculous. So I was absolutely gutted because obviously I didn't have any bad intention. I was not bringing drugs or anything like that. It was obviously... Anyway, so it was, so it was how my crossing of Australia started, and it had a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, really.
So you mentioned that you were planning on running on 6 continents, but only running across 4 continents. So if you had done the other 2 continents, where would you have run on those continents?
Well, for the African bit, Africa would have been my last continent. So I would have run on the west coast of Africa, including Algeria. And the idea would have been to cross at Gibraltar and go back up to Europe, back to Portugal when I started. So that would have been my African coast segment. And my Asia part would have been to continue a little bit to extend past Istanbul and run to the eastern part of Turkey on the Asian continent. And then a route that would have taken me through to Southeast Asia before joining Australia. So, yeah, I mean, I missed it. But on the other end, my crossing of Europe, which was supposed to be 6 months, 7,000 kilometers, ended up being a year and a half, 15,500 kilometers. So I saw a lot more of Europe than I had planned. So, you know, you can't have it all. That's all.
So the rule is that you have to travel in one direction, essentially. But because COVID interrupted your Europe trip, you had to go back to Paris and then fly back to the point where you left off and continue from there.
Yeah. So I always have to start a run where I finished another run. This is the continuous side. So for instance, if I stop the run at my hotel door, the next day I have to restart the run at my hotel door. Having said that, I can finish a run somewhere, go somewhere for the evening, and in the morning I've got to be back at the exact same coordinate to continue my running. Having said that, the rule also says that if you hit a dead end, then you can restart your run whenever you have left it, days or weeks or months before, and restart another route from there. So that allowed me during COVID, I had to constantly be pushed back because so many countries had closed their borders. I couldn't keep going east. So I tried to go back west and then go up north to try and contour the issues, but it was not always possible. So I hit many dead ends during COVID in Europe. But at the end of the day, all that mattered is that there was a continuous line of running across the continent. But yeah, there was twice as much running as should have been in the plan. Yeah.
But it's all part of the adventure. That's the whole point.
Absolutely. And that even confirmed even more the appetite I had for it, seeing how, I wouldn't say amazed myself, but looking back at it now, this World Run is over it's been 2.5 years since it's over. Looking back at it, some days I'm like, gee, where did I get that from? This desire to go against all odds and whatever happened. But to me, at that time, it felt so obvious that it was the only thing to do. And to be fair, I didn't have anything else to go back to. I had ditched my career. I had no home. I had nothing. I had no belongings. Living on the roads, doing my run every day was the only thing that was there in my life. So in this context, it seemed very obvious that there was no other choice. And this was what I wanted. So it felt very natural.
Now, I hate to ask this question because I don't want to take away from all the incredible things you've just done, but I'm sure people are asking you, well, now what are you going to do? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, I think when, the problem with starting my sports achievement with a world run is that, it's difficult to match that in terms of, I would say a word, I would say the ambition, but I'm not saying it in, setting your sights on something, but achieving something that is really inspiring even to myself, and that gives me such a strong desire and drive. I wanted to wake up every morning for my marathon because I wanted the adventure and the surprises of the road. Throughout my career, I always needed an alarm clock in the morning to wake up. Most days on the World Run, I didn't need an alarm clock. I so much wanted the day of adventure. I so much the joy that the simple thought I'm running around the world gave me whenever it occurred in my mind was so strong. I would smile from ear to ear. So it's very difficult when that is over, to find something that will give me as much. And I think I had to accept that for the moment, at least, it's impossible. So the way I've handled it was to set my mind on different things. I didn't want running to be central in my life because I knew I could only be disappointed if I go running around the block. So I'm still exercising, of course, mind you, when you've done that, you don't want to, a bit of running, a bit of cycling, a bit of other things. But now my next adventures are on the sea. So sailing is a big part of my life now. And between sailing and cycling, I found a balance of still being outdoors, still exploring, and still feeding my quest for adventure, which is at the core of me, and of discovering the world differently. So yeah, that's what is coming next or already happening, yes.
Well, you've conquered the land and now you're going to conquer the sea.
Oh, there is a funny story about that. The only woman to have run around the world before me is a British lady called Rosie Swell Pop. So she was the first woman to run around the world. But before that, she had actually been sailing around the world as well. So I found it an extraordinary coincidence that my natural instinct after this world run was to go towards the sea. And in a way, it would be very funny if one day I ended up sailing around the world. But I'll leave that for later.
What kind of sailing do you enjoy?
Catamaran sailing. So it's not racing, but it's more... But yeah, I used to enjoy anything on water. I was very keen on windsurfing before. So I enjoy a good challenge of trying to navigate the seas, yeah.
Speaking of navigation, obviously, one thing I'm very impressed with is that you don't wear a running watch. You just run, and you run based off of effort and, like you said, tuning into your body. But obviously, you had GPS with you to mark your location and to keep you on track. But I imagine you still got lost even with GPS.
Yeah, so basically the way I was organized is on the handlebar of my stroller, I had two GPS clicked, two Garmin GPSs, but the way I displayed, the display was set on kilometer only, so I didn't see any data about speed or anything. And so I had my satellite beacon, and I had on top of my stroller, I also had my phone, and I was on Google Maps all the time trying to follow my itinerary. And yes, there were a few instances, and I described some of them in the book, where unfortunately, Google Maps doesn't know everything and doesn't know that a bridge doesn't exist anymore for some, in some cases. Or, sometimes it's benign, like you go a wrong path or you go to a path that has got a gate and, you just have to find a way to go over the gate. Sometimes it's taking you through private properties, and that's a lot less fun. I had a run-in with that in Montana, where private property is sacred, like in most of the US. Yeah. And I could have ended in big trouble. Sometimes it's a bridge that's supposed to be there and is not there. And when you are too far into your run, then you may make a silly decision like, let's cross this river, which I've done. It could have had terrible consequences. Thank God it was all right. But Google Map is reliable, I would say 95% of the time. But when you run every day to a new place, like I did through this thing for 2.5 years, you are bound to get into a situation where, unfortunately, Google Map doesn't have this info. So, it's, again, dealing with it, trying to adapt, adjust, and stay safe.
Reading your book and talking to you today, I am really struck by how adaptable you are, where I think sometimes in running and in other areas of our lives, we are so focused on doing everything, quote unquote, correctly or sticking to the exact plan. And then we get a little bit frustrated when something doesn't go exactly to plan. But you've just described 2.5 years of essentially constant problem solving and assuming that something's going to go sideways. And when it does, I'll just figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, the only thing I was actually not making any compromise with, zero compromise, was keeping my engine in a good working state. And that, there was no compromise. Whatever the day brings, I will always be doing my body scan. I will always be listening to every signal my body sends. And that was not negotiable. Everything else, yes, I had to adjust to it. But that was also the appeal of this run, was that you cannot possibly plan 2 years of running and expect it to go to plan. Like I said, COVID was in my way 3 months into the run. But and actually, the appeal of this run is also all the things that I hadn't planned that will surprise me. I remember I had one interview before leaving for my world run, and the journalist asked me, "What do you expect of this world run? If I see you on the finish line of this world run, what do you want to say that the world run had brought you?" And I didn't know, but I just said, I want to say that I have been surprised, that it has surprised me. And this element of surprise is, of course, at the heart, of such an adventure. You want to be, and if the world wasn't surprising for me, I wouldn't go on such adventures. But I think, you want to be surprised by who you meet, by what you see, but by what you encounter and how you deal with it. And it was also a confirmation of knowing my core. I always had the sense that I had such abilities, but putting it to the test of the world run, there is no hiding behind anything. You see who you are for what it is. And so it was a good confirmation of it. It's not that I learned that about me, but I learned that it was, I was not kidding myself. That's this resilience, this stubbornness can be put to good use as well.
So as the record-holding fastest woman to run around the world, I know that you, before you embarked on this, used the previous people who had run around the world as resources. What would you like somebody who might want to do this? What would you tell them? What would kind of be your first piece of wisdom to them in them planning this journey?
Yeah, you're right. When I was planning my journey, all I had for guides were the books written by the 6 people who had gone before me and the rules of the World Runner Association. And to me, these books written by those who've been before me, I've read them so many times, the pages are falling off. The pages are falling off. It's as much as, because that was my only source of information. There is nowhere else I can get tips or wisdom from how to run so many marathons or so many kilometers for so long. So I really valued this. And I made a promise that if I was going to the end of this world run, I too would contribute to that. My book is, it's the story of my adventure, of what I love about it, but it's also for any other woman or man who would be tempted to do it. I tried to make it a valuable piece of information. That's why I didn't shy away from any topic. I talked about the body. I talked about even my infertility, everything in life that can lead you to where you are, and how you use all of this as strength to carry you forward. And I think, yes, if you wanted to launch on some adventure, I would say document yourself. Try to understand the important thing is to know why you're doing it. If your reason is legit and is completely anchored in you, there is no reason why you wouldn't get there, because you're going to put everything on the line to make sure you do, right? But I know for a fact that if I had set out on the roads of the world because I wanted to get a world record for something, there is no way I would have gotten there. I would have probably been injured or whatever, or demotivated quite quickly. But the reason I was doing it for was just me. I mean, it was just filling me with positivity every single day. So make sure that you are doing it for the good reason. Question yourself why you want to do it. That's what I would say.
Marie, thank you so much for your time today. The book is called Lootie's World Run. It's excellent. It's like part travel adventure book, part how-to running book, and then I love memoirs, so I just like reading other people's thoughts. But I really appreciate it. Did you enjoy writing the book as much as you did running around the world?
Yeah, because when you do finish this world run, the instant you click your GPS to record the last step of this world run, that moment, the world run is dead. It's finished. That's it. That's over. So and it's in an instant, something that you were focused for 2 years of preparation and 2 years plus of running, suddenly it doesn't have an outlet anymore. It's finished. So the idea to keep talking about it is has different reasons. One is to keep it alive, because if I keep talking about it and if people are interested in it, that means it still it gives more sense to my journey. And the second thing is, you are turning this world run into something that will help other people. And I'm not saying anyone can run around the world, but it's beyond that. It's how you achieve your wildest dream, how you set yourself, the discipline I put into it, the planning. It just goes to show that when you really want to do something, and if you start building it, like building that plan or whatever, you can get there. It doesn't matter what your dream is, It's just about making the first step. And my first step was this little doodle on a notepad. It can be anything, but there is value in going after it. And if talking about this journey is writing about it, can do that for other people, that's, I feel more rich of that as well. Definitely. So yes, writing the book was all of it together. It was reliving my adventure. It was knowing what I wanted to share and how. So it was a great way to pause after the world run and do something valuable. Yeah.
And now your book can be one of those books that future people who run around the world will have completely fall apart because they read it so many times.
Well, that would be a great thing to happen. I don't know if that will happen, but yeah, no, that would be a great thing to know that it has helped somebody else launch. That would be awesome.
Marie, thank you for being here today. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Like I said, everybody, the book is excellent. You should read it. Marie, thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's been a pleasure talking with you, really. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Visit runningexplained.com to learn more.